are. All right, so I'm going to do a super quick, and I realize I'm speaking very fast, and I'm doing it not because it's cold here in Boston, but because I want to really get to our content today with Robert. If you've never been to an ELA event, again, welcome. We're so happy you've decided to take a little bit of your day to be with us. We are an organization that supports ERGs around the world, and we really focus on learning and development solutions that are ERG specific. You'll see in just some of the examples of the companies and nonprofits that we work with, the academic institutions, government agencies, every shape and size. You don't have to be big and well branded and, a known brand to be part of the ELA family. But we also work globally, and we have not just companies that are global, but we actually work with companies that are not even based in the US. We have staff all over the world, and we have trainers all over the world. So we are very, very committed to meeting you where you are. I put this slide in because today and every day, this year at least, something you wake up to is going to rock your world, and unfortunately, not in a good way. And with the last week of events, I thought, I could use maybe a little adjustment, like a cognitive adjustment or like a chiropractor, right?
Yeah.
And one of my favorite is Maya Angelou, of course. So this quote, if you're not able to see it on screen, I'm going to read it out loud. You may not control all the events that happen to you or even around you for that matter, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. And I know
Wow.
it's easier sometimes to say it than do it, but that's what we're all about together today, for sure. Quick announcements. ERG University starts now this week, and so you can sign up for any and all these classes right online. There are ones for leaders, there's ones for sponsors, and there's ones for oversight managers. That data impact one is amazing. Please check it out if you haven't already. We'll put some of these links in the chat so you don't have to worry about copying it down right now. We have our ambassador program that's fully running, and that is if you share some of your, if you refer us to somebody, we're going to pay you for that referral, regardless if that organization or person buys anything. We just want to expand the message that ERGs are awesome. All right, so please check that out as well. There's no cost to that at all. We just started this year these amazing groups that have already taken off. If you're not a member of one of them, please check them out. So they are private LinkedIn groups, and we are vetting everyone who applies because we only want leaders and oversight managers in those. It's a peer-to-peer conversation opportunity. You need ideas for, oh, I don't know, International Women's Day or Black History Month or whatever it might be. You can put a note in there, and I'm sure the other folks would be happy to not only share ideas, but might even want to collaborate. We have an amazing amount of leaders in there that are just sharing, asking for help, supporting one another. So please, again, no cost to do that. We run an annual Zoom for each of these meetings. We had a tremendous Zoom for the women's group, and I say a Zoom. It's actually twice in the same day, so we can cover both all the time zones. So again, check it out. All the information about the Zooms and otherwise is in those groups. All right, lots of free resources. You're going to see an email later today that the book, ERG Intelligence, was just updated, and not only updated to reflect modern information and knowledge, but the template, one of the templates in the back is a policy guide template. It is a tremendous tool if you don't have a policy guide or you need to vet yours. It was completely and utterly reviewed by experts around the world, including legal experts, to make sure that the right information was in there so that you can have that in your policy guide. So check it out. PDF is free download. All these other documents are on our website for free. So if you have any interest, help yourselves. And labs that are coming up. After today's magnificent lab, we're going to have two other magnificent ones. You can see power presentation chips. That would be good with a little ketchup. Power presentation tips for ERG leaders specifically. Elena is amazing. You're going to love her. And then micro habits to avoid burnout, ERGs with Allison. So those are the next two. And every month we have another great one coming at you.
We
Organizational
did.
members make all these free things. And I should mention, as you know, being on One Lab today, that's also free. They allow us to make things available. And we want to recognize not only their commitment to being inclusive organizations, but allowing you all to join us and help make all organizations inclusive. So thank you to all our amazing sponsors. If you're interested in any kind of membership, individual organization, of course, we'll love to talk to you, and there's lots of options. Fast, I love it. Maybe too fast, but if I blew through something, you want more information, you let me know. I did that fast, as I said, because it's not every day that I get to hang out with Robert. But that was a day, that picture. Robert, when was that?
That
December?
was like November or late November, early December in Natick out at
Natick, which,
MathWorks.
yeah,
Math.
which was such an honor and fun to be there with you and meet some local folks. I actually live about 20, 30 minutes from Natick. So that was kind of one day we got to hang out. We're going to get to hang out here today.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's you in your much more serious pose. And I could
Uh,
spend the next hour kind of going through your bio because it's so amazing and impressive. Suffice to say, I think I'm going to leave it with you to help people understand what you do and who you are. But I would say that, you've been in this space for a really long time in a really great way, and you have so much knowledge that I'm just grateful that you're here with us today to share some of it.
well, yeah, I'm excited to be with you and everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us in what I think will be more of a conversation, right? Yeah, as you mentioned, I've done a lot of work with many organizations, when it comes to employee resource groups. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. The slide that you're showing there just shows, some of my clients. And I share that because, when you work with as many clients and organizations as I have, it does put me in a somewhat privileged position, right? Because I can take a step back. And when it comes to, employee resource groups, business resource groups, affinity networks, whatever you call them, you can see trends. You can definitely see best practices. You can see, hey, what are the hot topics? What are the most common derailers? What's the discourse? What's the narrative? And so I'm excited about sharing some of that experience, with all of you. Personally, how, when I worked in corporate America, I was a member of an ERG. I worked my way up to be the chair president of an employee resource group. And then even at one time served as an executive sponsor. So I've been on that side of the equation. So I know how rewarding being engaged with an ERG can be. But I also know it takes a lot of work, right? All of us are working 40, 60, 70 hours a week anyhow, but yet we've raised our hand to say, hey, I want to give back and I want to contribute to these employee resource groups. So that's why I've dedicated part of my career to helping individuals like all of you, to just make the biggest impact you can have with your employee resource groups and help you just be a little bit better at kind of charting the course and helping to guide these networks. So I'm calling today from the great city of Chicago, Windy City, a little cold today, 10 degrees. Next week I'll be in San Francisco, so a little bit warmer, Christy tells me. But so excited to see that people all over the country, and looks like even possibly some folks globally joining us here today. So I'm super excited.
I appreciate it. So I have some questions for you that I've kind of laid out that I want to kind of dig into
Mhm.
together. And because ELA, we talk to thousands of ERG folks every month as well. So
Yes.
I feel like I have these knowledge information in my head, but I honestly think that you have a very interesting perspective that often differs. And so anyone who wants to jump in on a question, again, chat or raise a hand. I'm
Hmm.
going to ask Robert, and I'm going to put him in the hot seat a little bit. He's agreed that that's
Please.
okay, but I'm going to ask a kind of a very honest question. When I
Mhm.
started ELA, people thought I was literally like my brain had fallen out of my head. They were like, "Why would you do that? Right? There's no
Wow.
money in it. The support for it." Now, this was back in 2018. You've been doing
Hmm.
it longer than I have. But people were like, why would you do that? And it's very nice for you to say, it's very nice for me to say, is because we want to help them. But in your heart, I'd like to hear like what is it about these ERGs that gets you up out of bed every morning that you're like, I got to help them.
Yeah, well, and great question. For me, it. it all has started based on the personal experience I had with employee resource groups. Just sharing a little bit about my backstory. I'm of I'm Hispanic Latino, parents originally from Mexico, came to the U.S., settled in Texas, became citizens, and that's where I was born. So I was born in Lubbock, Texas, West Texas, so soy Tejano. But even though I was born in Texas, Alyssa, I grew up in Minnesota. I still got that Minnesota accent.
I
Some
never
people,
heard that. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Um, so I'm one of those few Latinos que hablo español, but I can also ice skate and ice fish and snowshoe. And anyhow, Minnesota is a great place to live, great place to raise a family. But back in my formative years, when I was in high school and college, there just wasn't a very large Hispanic Latino population in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. So I struggled a bit with my sense of identity, right? Even though I was proud to be Latino, I didn't know when I went to work if I should shout it from the rooftop and like let everybody know, or if it was something I should downplay. And in fact, I had some of my early mentors who were telling me, Robert, don't mention you're Hispanic because, folks are going to think you're some affirmative action hire, you got special treatment. So the first part of my career, Alyssa, I didn't, I never denied my heritage, but I didn't like give it a full throttle embrace. But then
Mm.
I started to see some folks at my company that were unapologetically proud to be Hispanic and Latino. I'm like, I kind of like that. Like, where are they getting that, right? That sense of confidence, that gravitas that say, hey, I'm a great employee, but I'm also proud of my heritage. And for me, I realized that many of them were a part of our company's Hispanic Latino network at the time. So there was a company, 3M, makers of Post-it notes, Scotch tape, all that stuff. So I joined, and at first wasn't very active, but I joined, and I can say without any hesitation, Alyssa, that experience being in an ERG early on in my career, the interacting with those folks helped me feel much more comfortable in my own skin, helped me be comfortable with my sense of identity, and helped me be part of a community. And they just helped me how to be unapologetically proud to be Latino. So from a personal perspective, I saw the impact that these groups could have. Like, if you get one person to feel more comfortable in who they are and their sense of identity, that's gold, right? And I said, wow, the ERGs help with that. And then the second part of it is that, I was doing pretty well in the corporate world, kind of moving up, delivering results. And my mentor at the time, she came up to me and she said, Robert, you know what's going to happen to you in this corporate environment is you're going to move up because you're smart, work hard, smart, work hard, smart, work hard. But she said sooner or later, you're going to get to a level where everybody else is smart and everybody else works hard. And she said, well, when you get to that point, how are you going to differentiate yourself from all the other smart, hardworking people in the room? And I said, that's easy. Yeah, I'm loyal, I'm dependable, I'm reliable, I'm honest. And she's like, "Whoever, that's so boring. Like everybody is that, right? But what else is it?" And that's where I saw the other benefit that I could get from being involved in the ERG is that now, once I started taking on a leadership role, I was all of a sudden developing a strategy, managing a budget, leading a team, rubbing elbows with all these leaders outside of my functional unit. So it definitely helped elevate my visibility, my capability, and my promotability. And the fact that I saw people doing this above and beyond of their day job, I said that those are the folks we should celebrate. So uh, these ERGs have provided me a very solid platform that I've been able to build a very successful career upon. And that's why I've dedicated a lot of my career to giving back to all of you who are doing this work, because it's important, because it makes a difference. And that's why I'm trying to help you all be as strong as you can be.
I think Maria just gave you the title for your next book, and I think you
Okay.
need to write it like today. It's
Okay.
called Unapologetically Latino.
Latino. Yeah.
And if I can help you get that one out, it would be my honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you.
But thank you
Thank
for
you. Yeah.
sharing all that. I think, everything you said, I would absolutely 100% say I have the same, except I'm obviously not Latino, but one of the things that I was attracted to was not only I was studying the science of confidence. I still am a student of that.
Mhm.
And I knew that belonging was so important. I saw that ERGs could foster that. But I also knew that companies have the ability to provide those leadership skills and that professional development.
Yeah,
That, once you get into the work world, you may not have the time, money, ability to go get an MBA or whatever
yeah,
it might be. So it is really a underutilized path, and I really respect how you put that together.
yeah. And
Um,
real quickly, Alyssa, just
yeah.
to, when I go back, because I had some of my fellow colleagues when they started getting more involved in the ERGs, they're like, look at this guy, mira, in Spanish, they're like, mira, Bobby, ¿qué se cree? He thinks he's all that. Like he's a brown nose. They're doing this ERG stuff. But what I quickly noticed is that my promotional velocity started to accelerate. And then, so I would go back to those friends like, "Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I see you haven't been promoted in a couple of years. I've gotten like it's those little things, like
Well,
because yeah, working
yeah.
hard, delivering results, that's a price of admission. But these ERGs provide that little thing to help differentiate yourself. And particularly with regards to visibility and exposure, a lot of us are tend to be over mentored and under sponsored, right? And
Yeah,
an executive isn't going to sponsor us if they don't know who we are, right?
that's
So
right.
I think that's the other big thing about these ERGs is it provides individuals a chance to elevate that visibility and exposure.
All right, so I'm going to leverage what you just said because elevate and expose maybe today doesn't always feel like a good thing, right?
Yes.
Because it's a little scary what's happening, to say the
Hmm.
least. And the last few years have certainly ERGs have accelerated themselves in terms of their the way they work and all
Hmm.
that. But let's start with the positive. What are
Yeah.
some of the good things that you've seen that have changed, say, in the last 2 to 3 years that have really kind of been, oh, because I don't want to call them a silver lining. I please do
Sure.
not mistake that for
Yeah.
making up for the bad. But there's some good things that have come out of the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you
So
think?
so one of the things that I really have enjoyed seeing, particularly in the last 36 months, has been the ERG's kind of stronger embrace of metrics and measurements, right? But because there are a lot of folks within our organizations that see us as the food flag and fun folks, right? Oh, you guys do those nice socials and these cafecitos or whatever, but they don't really grasp the impact that we have. And and I would argue that we've always been good at measuring our activity, right? Hey, we have this many members, this many people showed up, we held this many events, and that's great. That's a good start. But we have been terrible at measuring our impact. And so one of the things that I've noticed is over these last couple of years, as there's been more scrutiny on inclusion initiatives in general, which then there's been more scrutiny on ERGs and are they making a difference? Seeing ERG leaders, program managers, just take a harder look at, hey, how can we do a better job of measuring our impact, right? So that way, when that middle manager comes to us and thinks we're the food flag and fun folks, we can say, well, yeah, we help to elevate this, we help to reduce that, we help to contribute to this. We become much better at at metrics. Now, I have also noticed that an ERG or an organization said, you're right, we're going to be better at, metrics, there's still a learning curve. And I see that kind of taking about 24 months. So even if a company says we need to do a better job of measuring our impact and they put the stake in the ground, it's still taking 24, maybe 36 months before they're kind of at an ability where they can show a certain scorecard or a dashboard that says these employee resource groups have helped make an impact in these areas. So we're not all there yet, but I think that's been one of the positive, kind of things that I've seen come out over the last couple of years because of all this focus on this.
I have to say a little bit about that because
Please.
I think we hear there's a lot of confusion about metrics in general. And one of
Mhm.
the confusions that we're trying to battle, at least at ELA, is that ERG leaders do not have access, will never have access to some of the data to show the impact that everyone's talking about, like
Mhm.
retention
Yeah.
or even engagement in the company. They can measure maybe engagement in their group. So one of the things that we're trying to help people kind of focus and not try and do something that is literally impossible, is look at
Yeah.
health of a group, but that overall dashboard type of metrics that you mentioned for the oversight people. And I'm curious, I'm going to ask and
Hmm.
people, please, everyone who's on here, if you want to put something in the chat, um, share with us the kind of metrics that you are now looking to do. Like share it with your other colleagues so they can see what you're looking to do. And also, if there's something there that maybe we haven't seen or we think that maybe is not the right metric, and I say we, Robert, we have a
Hmm.
bunch of ELA experts online too. We'd like to have a conversation to just because I don't want you all out there banging your head against the wall trying to do something that's not quite
Yeah.
frankly possible.
Yeah.
But at the
And
oversight level,
mhm.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And you're right. Alyssa, there's some companies that are more transparent than others, but some of the successes I have seen, metrics that ERGs have been able to capture. For example, you mentioned kind of the engagement, score, right? So I've seen several organizations who, like most companies, they'll do an annual or biannual all employee survey, satisfaction survey, the Q2, whatever they do to say, hey, how's our employees doing? And so one of the things I've seen as of late is companies say, hey, we still ask all of our employees to complete that annual survey.
Hmm.
But now we're asking them to say, hey, just tell us if you're a member of an ERG.
Hmm.
We didn't need to know which one, if you think you're active or not, but do you consider yourself a member of an ERG?
Absolutely.
And of the half a dozen companies that I've seen have done that, they get their overall engagement score, and then they cut it by those folks who said they're in an ERG, and it's almost always higher, right? So there's at least a metric that says being in an ERG leads to greater employee engagement. And
Absolutely.
what was really funny is that one company, I was talking to their inclusion person, they're like, Robert, guess what? Our managers, part of their rating is based on the engagement score of their employees. So now you had all these middle managers saying, okay, better engagement helps me. Being in an ERG leads to better engagement. So now you start to see this new focus on middle managers encouraging their employees to be more actively involved because it helps with engagement.
Absolutely. We have a couple of members actually have done it for years now, and that's
Excellent.
interesting because then you can see trends, right?
Yeah.
And you can look at things like what's going on in the political, economic environment and correlate all that. The numbers that we're seeing is it's at least 10%. And I see some folks online who I know you do this in your organization, they're getting 14, 15% more engagement
Wow.
for ERG members. So amen. Let's
Yeah.
do more. And if you need some, again, support to do it, please let one of us know because this is amazing data to have when you
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
to your manager and say, this is why you need to be in the ERG, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. All
But
right.
like I said, it takes some time, right? So give yourself some grace. Don't think tomorrow we're gonna have here's the scorecard that tells all the, but you just have to start somewhere. So start with a couple metrics, tweak it, adjust, say, oh, you know what, this doesn't really tell us anything, or this is always higher. But just get it into that practice of measuring things that eventually you'll kind of get to the point where here are some good data points and metrics that we can use to justify why we are important and why we should exist, why should we be supportive, and why more and more people should get involved.
Yeah, and folks, if you're not sure which those metrics are, that free book I mentioned, there's a list of them in there, and there's lots of other resources. So happy to give you help on what you should be measuring or what's practical and all that.
Yeah,
There's a couple questions in chat. I don't want to
please.
miss them. So first and foremost, let me go back here. We had one from Veronica. I think we might have answered all of this, but let's make sure. It's she
Mhm.
put in here. Have you observed any evolution or changes in the maturity of ERGs in response to shifts in the DEI landscape and external scrutiny? Specifically, have ERGs altered their structure, governance, or activities as organizations adopt subtler approaches to DEI to reduce public criticism?
Okay, big question, and thanks
Big
for the question. So a couple of things I've seen. I have seen several organizations make the decision to tier their groups, right? So
Mhm.
one particularly a company based here in the greater Chicagoland area, it's a financial services firm. But they kind of went into this period. I think they had 14 ERGs, right? The usual suspects and a couple others. So one of the things that they did, and I've seen others and say, you know what? Our ERGs are going to be the vets, women's pride, Hispanic, Latino. And then some of the other groups that they considered ERGs before, like working parents, they had a sustainability one. What they did is they said, you know what, we're going to tier them. We're still going to recognize you, but we're not going to call you an ERG because your focus is kind of narrow, right? So they said, hey, we're still going to support, fund you, but we only see ERGs who have more of this holistic value proposition. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but that is something I've seen some organizations do to say, hey, yeah, we want to recognize these groups, but now we need to be more diligent as to what we consider an ERG and what we consider another sort of affinity network of sort that we want to recognize, but not hold to the same standards as ERG. So I've seen that. I've seen the more kind of naming change, like, women and allies, black and allies, just to kind of convey that you don't have to be to belong. I've seen some of that. I've seen some changes in budgeting, but for the most part, at least my experience, ERGs have still kind of remained a safe space within the inclusion function that there's been minor tweaks, but not any big wholesale changes, at least that I've seen. Now, there's the few exceptions of some companies who've gotten rid of their ERGs, but that tends to be more the exception than the norm. So I think ERGs are faring relatively well given the environment, but that could all change tomorrow, right? But so far, I think we've been holding our own.
Yeah, I think we are holding, and I see the we. So 3 trends ago, and it's
Hmm.
continued through all our trends, we kept saying for the companies that never really bought into inclusion, they're the chickens that
Yeah,
said, no, no more ERGs because
yeah.
they use the directives and other things as an excuse, right? In terms of language, inclusion, and making sure that every event, every program, every opportunity, even leadership roles in the ERG are open to anyone who
Hmm.
applies within a fair scope. That has definitely, I've seen that change. And as a result, application processes, for example, they have to adjust to that. The
Hmm.
governance overall has to adjust a little bit to that, but I don't think it's changed really the operation of it. And I think in many cases, we always assumed everyone was invited, but didn't necessarily make it very clear.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is definitely a big deal. But
Yeah.
yeah, I for the
It's
ones that backed out, too bad for you because you know
yeah.
what? Soon, not just sooner, but really soon, I think they're going to feel the pain of hiring. I think they're going to feel the pain of, people leaving as soon as the job market opens. Again, I think people are going to be like, bye-bye. So,
Yeah.
too
I
bad for them.
agree. One of the things that I guess the external environment has had the biggest impact on ERGs, and that is on the ERG leaders themselves. I'm just seeing a much higher level of burnout. Folks who, hey, they've done this work, they're glad to do it, honored to do it, but because of all this, the increased focus, attention, some folks like I just can't do it anymore. So I've seen just the whole issue of succession planning and leadership continuity. Like at some companies, the ERG leader is like the person who draws the shortest straw. Like, hey, who wants to lead the group? Like, I don't want to do it. You do it. And so then you get someone who's like, well, I suppose if nobody else would do it, I'll do it. And great for that person, but I miss the days when these roles were more highly desired and coveted. Right now, it's that's becoming a challenge, right? So because of the increased burnout, I think ERGs and companies are having to adjust to say, hi, how do we make this, how do we provide more level of support to our ERG leaders? How to create the conditions that nurture their success? And we need to do a better job of identifying the next generation of leaders much sooner because the burnout is happening quicker. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
if
no,
you're
it's
probably
very.
seeing some of the same things.
Oh, it's absolutely a valid point. But, I'm going to look at it from maybe a little different lens in
Mhm.
that I think a lot of the burnout, not all of it by any means, you have these brilliant, passionate people.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you know, almost a recipe for we want to go in and do all these things. And then when they hit the walls, and the walls are either things like executive sponsors who are not really engaged,
Mhm.
or middle managers. And I mean, the person that you actually report to in your higher job saying, hey, you got to do your job, your real job, the one that
Yeah.
you're getting paid for. And those two factors, I think, are the things that really light up that burnout more than anything. So the good news, I think, is a lot of companies, we've been doing more executive sponsor training than ever. And that's a good thing because they want to get
Mhm.
those executives not just to be performative, figureheads, but actually engage in the right way, not micromanage either.
Yeah.
And middle managers, and I have to stop here because this is like one of those big issues that's not getting better fast enough. What do you think about middle managers? What can we do so that they get on board with ERGs, Robert? Anything you've seen that works?
Well, the thing that I've seen has worked the best has been those metrics that I did, right? Because it just provides a great rebuttal, right? For the folks like, oh, this work is important, but so that way this idea of being better at our ability to measure impact helps to refute that, right?
Mhm.
The other things is just more and more testimonials, right? I shared a little bit, a couple of the reasons why I joined an ERG. Another one that I share quite a bit is I have two sons. They're 24 and 21 now. But about 7 years ago, my youngest son came up to me and he's Latino, right? So he's like, "Oye, Papi, you need to ease up on this Latino thing. Like, yeah, I feel like you're pushing it on me." Right? I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just want you to be proud of your heritage, right?" Well, it turns out when he was about 13 or so, that's when he realized he was gay, right? So he was struggling with his sexual identity, and then I was talking about this Latino that it kind of came too much to him. But once I found that out, Alyssa, and I went to a lot of the clients, organizations that I work with, and I went to their pride networks and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, how can you help me be the most inclusive parent to a child in the LGBTQ?" And just the amount of support, guidance, wisdom, do's and don'ts, that again, it's hard to capture that. So when the middle manager says, "Well, what's the impact? Show me the metric." Yeah, hopefully we have some more kind of quantitative stuff. But having some of those testimonials, like, to help an employee be a stronger, more loving parent to a child who, is kind of in the part, like sometimes that's what will break through, right? So we don't always do a good enough job of capturing those
Agreed.
testimonies
Yeah,
of
I
the
call them
impact.
qualitative data points.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if I were to quiz everyone who is here in 2 weeks, which I won't do, my friends, but if I did, I guarantee they're going to remember that story and not the number that I threw out earlier,
Yeah,
right? Because
exactly right.
that's what sticks here. Now, the good
Mhm.
news is those are the stories that are a little bit easier to collect if you're an ERG leader, because you can just ask for them. But
Yeah,
I'm going to go back to some more questions that we had here.
please.
Tasha asked, tools and resources do we recommend, do you or I recommend to help measure impact and linking activities and programming to business impact specifically?
Well, there's one that, of course, be my selfish plug, but it's a little bit, it's still surprising to me. So some folks may know that I'm the creator of the 4C model, right? And it's been around for 15 years. I would argue that's probably the most commonly used strategic frameworks for ERGs in corporate America. And all the 4C model advocates for is, right, is that anything in employee resource groups do can fall into one of four pillars, right? They're helping create a more inclusive culture. They're helping the members with their career. They're helping to elevate a sense of community, or they're helping the business and what I call commerce. So that's where the name comes from, the 4C model. Um, but what I was saying is that there's also an assessment that companies can take that allows them to kind of evaluate, hey, how are our ERGs doing, in each one of the 4C pillars? And I guess and to date, about 250 corporations have taken it. Um, but it still surprises me that more haven't, right? Because by taking the assessment, and whether it's my 4C assessment or I don't know, let's say maybe you have one, I know other providers have theirs, but the ability to get a much more textured understanding of the current state of your ERGs, the ability to get data so that way your ERGs are making data-driven decisions, the ability to kind of establish a baseline to say, hey, based on this assessment, this is how well we're doing as of January 2026. Let's implement some changes. Let's take it again in 2 years, see if we see if we made progress. And then the ability to kind of benchmark against other ERGs at other companies. Like that sort of information is gold. And it surprised me that more companies don't take an assessment such as that. I've seen some clients take it just to check the box, but then I haven't seen them do much with the data. And I'm even involved in an organization where I give away the assessment for free for some ERGs, and they don't take it. So that's the part that I has been frustrating to me is again, whether it's mine or your, if you have an assessment or others, take those assessments because the information, particularly in more of this data-driven age, our ability to make data-driven decisions, establish a baseline benchmark, I think that's going to be the next wave, the next tool in our arsenal to combat those middle managers. So it's kind of still measurement driven, but we have to speak the language of the stakeholders. We've been doing it great for our members, the belonging, the inclusion, but now we have to open the aperture of how we speak. And I think those sorts of analytics are going to be a big part of
Mm.
the success of these ERGs moving forward.
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna maybe narrow it a little bit.
Mhm.
Just your assessment is wonderful because you're measuring kind of how is it tying in a very logical way, like how are
Mhm.
you doing in these areas? I
Yeah.
will say that we used to have an assessment. We stopped doing it, and there's other people that have assessments, and I have a real concern with them for
Mhm.
two reasons. So be careful. Like you were very generous. Like just do an assessment. Don't just do any assessment.
Mhm.
But what an assessment often does, yours doesn't do this, so it's really, really lovely. But other ones will like kind of assume that what works for other groups will work for you,
Mhm.
or what you they can do you can do
Yeah.
too. That's not always the truth, right? So
Yeah.
the benchmarks are not accurate, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, it's a moment in time,
Mhm.
right? I know many of you on the call have had reorgs, and if you take an assessment right after a reorg, it's going to be very different than if you take it a year from now or a year before. So
Yeah.
you have to like be very smart with some of these assessments to be careful. Roberts is excellent. We have other tools that we use that are not as much of an assessment as it is really understanding what you have and what you can measure. And again, in
Mhm.
the book, there's some information in the trends report. If you're a member of ELA, you have access to all our blueprints, and there's metrics blueprints there that really help you think it through. And I guess my only caveat again is what works for other companies, even other groups within your organization,
Mhm.
may or may not apply to your leadership team and group at that time. So be a little selfish, like really say what's going to be the most meaningful thing that we can do and we can measure. And it takes a little bit of thought. Can't
Yeah.
just pop that into ChatGPT, but
Yeah.
maybe it can
Yeah.
help a little. All right. I hope that's answering questions. And folks, if we're not answering your questions as well as you'd like, you can hit us up again because,
And
we're
while you look for the
our
next
best.
question, Alyssa, one of the things that I have been able to do because of that, because so many companies have taken this assessment, I have this huge normative database, right, that
I
I can
bet.
mine. And
Yeah.
now with AI, I can do generative AI, so now it's kind of predict. But one of the things that I have noticed is if you look at the four pillars, and I think they're all equally important, right? But if you look at around George Floyd, COVID, when companies were taking the assessment, they were off the charts in kind of the community initiatives and the culture initiatives, like the inclusion, belonging stuff, which made sense, right? Companies now who have taken the assessment, like you said, it's a moment in time. But now we're seeing less activity and allocation of resources on those pillars, culture and community, and much, much
Robert.
more on the career pillar.
Oh,
Folks
good.
saying, hey, how can the ERG help with my promotional velocity? And then on that commerce pillar, like what can
Yeah.
we do to support the business? So again, I'm not saying that's the right focus, but now with that sort of mega data, you can kind of say, hey, this is kind of the directions ERGs are moving, at least as of right now, because of the environment that we're in.
I love it. I love it. Yes, I agree. I'm going to go back to that middle
Mhm.
manager conversation that I somehow detoured around, and I'm not going to let us off the hot seat for that.
Please don't.
Something that we've seen, actually, two things that we've seen have been really helpful. One is asking or insisting with your executive sponsor that that individual invites their direct reports to some of the programming that your group is doing. Now, I say some, not all of
Mhm.
it. Tell them which ones and tell them how you want them there, right? Maybe you
Yep.
just want them to participate. Maybe you want them to introduce themselves. But when an executive sponsor, who's typically a very high level individual, says to their person, you need to go to this, I'm going to be there. That makes a difference. And once
Yep.
they feel and experience the magic of an ERG, it tends to help. And we're seeing a lot of that. And then the other thing, and I do want you to comment on this thing, is that we're seeing more and more ERG, I don't want to say the leaders, but I think it's actually coming from other places, insisting that the work that they're doing for the ERG is reflected in their hired job performance
Mhm.
reviews. Are you seeing that? And how do you feel about that?
I'm seeing a little bit of it, not enough of it, in my opinion, right? Because for the things we've been talking about, these ERGs make a difference, right?
Hmm.
These employees are working their butts off, and yet they want to do more, right? And for that not to be celebrated, not for that not to be rewarded, for me, I think it's it's just a very binary view, right? So I am starting to see more activity there, but clearly not enough, right? And so what was encouraging and then discouraging a little bit is right before kind of particularly this administration, and I don't want to get into the pillow discussion, but um, I was starting to see a little bit more of what I would call talent share, where some organizations, for example, where they would say, hey, our ERG leaders, they don't do it above and beyond their day job. We're going to incorporate that into their day job. So their manager agrees to allow them to spend 10, 15, 20% of their time in that role. So we start to see a few more of those. You get companies like, Bisper Myers Squibb, right? Their ERG leaders, they take a leave of absence from their full-time job, and all they do is run the
Hmm,
EBRG of the Black women's for a
love
period
it.
of time, and then they go back. But those are still more the exception than the
Yeah,
norm.
yeah,
That some of that momentum that was starting just has kind of plateaued a little bit. But that energy is still kind of within some of those companies, and so it's starting to be pushed into this. Okay, maybe we can't do a talent share, but let's do a better job of giving credit for this work that our employees do on top of their day job, and having the organization, have more of a discussion with those middle managers to say, hey, listen, buddy, these folks are making a difference. And if I support them at the C-suite, you better support them at that next level below.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mentioned that we have all these new get-togethers, the leader get-togethers, and one of the things is when we're reviewing people who want to join, is we look at their profiles, and it's depressing, quite honestly, that people are not putting that you're leading ERGs on your profiles. You don't have to put it in the, you could put it anywhere. You could put it in volunteer or your, just interest, whatever. But there's like a little bit maybe. I don't know if they're trying to hide it, embarrassed, worried. I don't know what it is, but even if just the people on this call started putting that on their LinkedIn, that was clear, I think the more people who say this work is awesome, and it doesn't just have to be the senior people, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But do you think people are embarrassed to be an ERG leader, or people on the call? Are you embarrassed to be an ERG because you're not? It's not on your LinkedIn profiles.
Yeah, yeah. And
Rare.
if you are, then it's more of a sign of the organization, right? But one of the things that, and I'm sure you do this too, Alyssa, is that when I get brought in by a company, right? Like I can say things that sometimes the internal folks can't
Sure.
because if
Yeah.
an executive doesn't like it, fine, they don't bring me back, big deal, right? But particularly with the credentials that I bring, the PhD, the book, teaching courses at Stanford, Harvard, like,
Yeah, you know what you're
yeah,
saying.
when I tell them like other companies are doing this, and why can't you do that here? And you get the same thing. Well, they're a different industry. They're more conservative. I'm like, yeah, but you keep telling me you want more of your BRGs, but you won't fund them. You won't support the leaders. You won't give them credit on like you're not doing enough to create the conditions that nurture their success. And then you're going back to them and say, well, you're not making a big impact. It's because you're not creating that environment for them. And so I can come in with those best practices. And it's funny, executives don't like to feel like they're being outmanaged by other companies. They're like, wow, I guess, why couldn't we do that here? And then it started a different conversation. But I hope that when you meet with those executives, you push a little bit because you and I can, where maybe an internal person can't.
Oh, yes. No, this is what happens when you get to be a certain age. You don't care about pushing. And I
Yeah.
pushed some really senior people last
Yeah.
week, and I could see the oversight person like this, and she's like, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Um, but, here's the thing. I also come loaded with data. And, there's numbers in the book that I use, but there's also this one magical slide that I'm happy to share with folks. We're going to start putting it out there for everyone on the ROI of all of this. And when I
Yeah.
say to an executive, here's the data and here are the sources, and companies that do this well get 23% on average increase in profit. If that's not something you want, then don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What?
here's the thing, if you don't do it well, it's going to be a negative
Yeah.
profit.
Yeah. One of the things that impressed a client recently was like, you know, uh, I teach executive ed course at Harvard there in Cambridge, but the 4C model is actually part of a Harvard Business Review case study that the Harvard MBA students have to go and stuff. So a lot of times I'll share that with those executives like, oh, Harvard MBA students are being taught about this model or they're talking about ERGs. I'm like,
Awesome. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
are.
Yep.
You may not be, but some are, right? It's just
Yep.
another way to kind of, speak to them.
Yes.
One question I did want to get to ask you, Alyssa, and ask the participants is something I've seen come up a lot is this, I guess, how would I describe it? The difference between advocacy and activism, right? Because
Mm.
I've been talking to a lot of ERG leaders that are saying, Robert, my ERG members are coming to me saying we should protest or we should put out a statement. We don't, we don't, we need to say something about what's happening with immigration. And the leaders, they see that passion, but they're like, but that's not like our role. Like, are you seeing some of that? Because that's probably been the hottest topic I've seen in the last 4 months, in the last quarter or so, is this, how do we advocate for a community without coming across as kind of activist and pushing too hard or demanding? Love to get your thoughts or even any of the folks on the call if they're
Yeah.
seeing
Oh, Jennifer, right away. Yes, we've had these
it.
conversations.
Yeah.
Well, these words are tough because they do get interchanged a lot.
Yeah.
And this is just one woman's opinion, but we have to be mindful that the funding for our ERGs is coming from an
Mhm.
entity, whether it's for profit, nonprofit, and so on. And so activism, going out and protesting, particularly as it will be very visible these days, everything's visible, right?
Hmm.
Could really have an impact on that brand and that
Oh yeah.
organization. And I have to support the people that say that is something you can choose to do on your own, but it shouldn't be an activity that is kind of like encouraged through the organization. With that said, advocacy, I think, is a way of speaking up, bringing your voice,
Hmm.
bringing your perspective to things that are within that scope of the
Oh yeah.
organization. So giving feedback on products, getting in front of those benefits people and being like, hey, we need something for my community is a great way to advocate, right? Bathroom bills have been created because the ERGs spoke up. There's all kinds of other examples I can give you that because the ERG said, my community needs this, but that's in the scope of the
Yeah.
organization, right?
Yeah.
Product changes, product innovation, of course. Um, Going to making sure that the ERG is updating the executives, telling them things that are going on, telling them things that they need, not just the executive sponsor, but other individuals. So maybe it's not a direct line. Maybe you can't just bust into the SLT meeting, but you can make sure
Yeah.
that your executive sponsor is informing everybody else of what your team needs. So, that advocacy, we're not doing a great job. And that's part of what we have to teach the executive sponsors to do. And I don't even really use the word advocacy for them because it kind of washes over their head.
Yeah.
It's where can you represent this group where they're not in the room?
Yeah. And that's so important, right? Because we want every employee, every member to feel their voice is heard, valued, solicited, respected, and that their voice is part of shaping the future that they experience. I know we're almost out of time. I guess the last topic I wanted to make sure to reference um, is that I'm starting to see the role of the ERG leader change, right? Part of because of the burnout, right? Um, but to me, the ERG leaders of today basically have to make 4 to 6 key decisions a year, right? What are our priorities? How are we going to allocate capital? Who's got next? How are we going to measure success? How are we going to whatever those 4 to 6 key that's where I'm starting to see them focus their efforts. Like, let's make these 4 or 6 key decisions. And then the implementation of that strategy, that's the leadership team because for the leader to make the decisions and execute it, that's where the burnout's coming out. So I've been focusing a lot of time with organizations I work with, like how do we reshape the ERG leader role so it's more focused on kind of decision making and helping others with the execution of those decisions. I don't know if you're seeing something similar or maybe
Well,
kind of tangentially.
yeah, I mean, from the get-go, so the blueprints, there's actually six of them, and your number is
Okay.
right on the money
Yeah.
in each of those areas to help them think through the strategic issues and decisions, not necessarily say, I'm going to do X, but here's what the group wants to do, and this is how we're going to do it. So, yeah, we've seen that forever. And yeah, I'm right on it with you that leaders need to be more of the thinkers and then engage lots more people to help in doing. And that's not always easy. You don't get a lot of volunteers, but even, one of the things that we are seeing relative to that, Robert, is micro roles. So, like, somebody might not be on the leadership team, but they would have a responsibility to do one thing, maybe run one event or be the
Hmm.
onboarding chair for new members.
Yeah.
And that's great. Take it or leave it. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been watching the hand in the corner here of my very dear friend Ryan, who is not only a wonderful human, but happens to be managing all the ERGs at a small company that kind of knows ERGs called Xerox.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, come online and talk to me. And my hand went up because I was waving at you.
Okay, hello, hello. Hi, Alyssa. This has been great, and I'm just going to back up a little bit here to answer your question, kind of talking about the LinkedIn and what you're seeing on people's profiles. So certainly not embarrassed to put it out there and say that I've been involved with ERGs since, well, I don't know, 15, 17 years at Xerox, and the roles that I've played. At times, it's been a dual role. So kind of touching on, Robert, what you touched on or you had spoke about was, you're not in it full time or a full time capacity because the head count or the management, role isn't specifically there, and it is a lot of volunteer. So I wonder if some people just wonder, are curious, how do you accurately display that? So without diminishing your day job, but also highlighting the work that you're doing, wanting it to be at the top of the page, but realistically from an ethical perspective, that's not necessarily your full 100% of the time day job. Uh, how, I guess, maybe a little bit of talk on that or how we can still highlight that. Because I've struggled with that in some of the roles where I've got my day job, but I'm still, a 60-40 split and in how I've been able to balance both.
Yeah. I'll share this, and then unfortunately, I'll need to pop off. But
Oh, sorry.
I just kind of just think back of what folks call your brand or executive presence to say, hey, part of my brand is to say, hey, if you hire me, if you work with me, I can deliver X, right? That's my brand. This is my promise. My brand is my promise. So if I feel that part of my promise to the organization I'm at currently or a future one is the ability to help shape, guide, lead ERGs, then absolutely I would include that, right? It's just one of the other skills and capabilities that I have because guess what? The other person maybe has never done that ERG, right? But that was always important to me on how I showed up and the value I can bring to the company because it was important to me. I would let that be part of your criteria of to say, hey, do I include it or not? And if it's part of the promise that you want to make to others, absolutely, absolutely do it. So,
Great.
but anyhow,
Thank you
Alyssa, I
very
need to
much.
jump
I know
off.
you need to run,
It's
my
been an
friends. Thank
honor
you.
being
Thank
the
you, Rob.
subject of your
Thank you.
grace
Thank
and
you. Thank
favor.
you.
Let's do this again soon. Thanks for jumping on and wishing you all the best.
Take care. Thank
Take care.
you.
Alrighty.